Davide Traxler. Welcome to the Executive Talk. You come from a very international background. I'll try to get this right. You were born to Italian and British parents in New York. You lived in Brazil. You lived in Europe. You speak 6 different languages. You attended French school wherever you are. Did that help you in your kind of career and where you are now? Because as we know, the watch industry is highly international as well.
It is, and what I say is there's always the pro and the cons. I would say the con is you don't have the deep roots of people that you followed you since your childhood, and the pro is you adapt everywhere. So you walk into a room in the middle of China and you learn to listen, you learn to try to understand what people are trying to convey, you respect difference and diversity.
But when we talk about the cons, as you say, maybe you don't really relate to where you are at the moment. Do you have something like a home? Do you call somewhere your home?
Not really. No, not at all. My home, actually, where I'm really most comfortable is on the airplane, because I can switch off my phone and just think of something else.
It must be hard in a position like this. If I mean, you live in the canton of Neuchâtel, where Parmigiani is based. That's quite a change. I mean, if you've lived in New York and if you lived in the big the big cities, the big towns in the world, and then you go back to Neuchâtel, that's quite a change, isn't it?
Well, Neuchâtel is actually a rather charming canton, and Fleurier is a special place, and the watchmaking industry has been there forever, and so it has a real meaning to be there. I think it has less sense if you have a watchmaking company that has a headquarter in a big city. I think it makes more sense to be where the watchmakers are. And that's what's nice about it, is you're really connected to what our industry is all about and where it comes from and where it's going.
But when we look at where the Swiss watch industry comes from, it's often from places like this, from the Val de Travers, from tiny little valleys, tiny little villages as well. Did that attract you as well when you decided, I'd love to work for a company which is so rooted in tradition and in tiny little places like this? Well,
what's beautiful about it is it's small and everyone relates to you. So everyone knows who you are and you know who everyone is. And that sense of community is interesting. So wherever you go, you can talk about the everyday life of everyone. And when you're in New York, that just doesn't happen.
One last question about your life, where you come from. You were born to a diplomat father, so you were traveling quite a lot. I read somewhere that one of the education tips he gave you, or kind of advice he gave you, wherever you go, just shut up first and just listen and adapt. Did that help you in your job?
That certainly has been always very helpful. I mean, as a child, I met politicians, presidents, even when the first president, I think I was 11 when I met him. And so you learn to shut up and just listen to everyone, and at the same time not give too much relevance to anyone, because we're all human beings and at the end we're all the same.
Did the diplomatic influence, or let's say the diplomatic background that you have through your parents, through your father, did that help you in the watch industry as well? Because some might claim it's quite an enclosed industry, community as well. They don't communicate as openly as other industry would. I mean, it has a little bit
of similarity. There are similarities, and depending on countries, I would say Swiss diplomats are similar to the watchmaking, very subdued and very careful in their words. If you take some countries, they have foreign diplomacy that is much more lively and noisy. And so I think it depends on countries. I think watchmaking is the true expression of the Swiss way of being. We don't argue with anyone. We try to keep a message very clear and very clean, and we try to make sure that we don't overdo or overpromise ever.
It is a very Swiss industry, and it is a very Swiss product in a way. Do you feel sometimes that this is not valued enough here in Switzerland? Because wherever you go in the world, we're almost like one-to-one kind of stamps of the watch industry, and people keep asking us about the watch industry. But if you talk to someone in Switzerland, yes, we know we do watches, but we're often talking about other industries as well. I mean, are we underselling ourselves in that regard?
I wouldn't say so. I think the recognition worldwide is extraordinary, and I also feel that when you speak to people in Switzerland, everyone has some personal relation to something in watchmaking, whether it's a watch itself, whether it's a story, a grandfather's piece. Everyone has a strong connection to a watch, and that is something typical from Switzerland.
How can you, as a CEO, kind of build that link to a new brand? You've been at Parmigiani for 2 years now. You've worked for other brands as well. I take it that you were highly attached to those brands while you were working there. Now, stepping to a new role, stepping into a new brand, is it easy or is it difficult to kind of get that new link to the new brand?
Well, I think the first thing is when you join a brand is you have your idea of the brand, and when you join it, within the first 3 months, your idea changes completely. It's kind of a new learning, and you really learn to understand what it is from the inside and not what is your perception from the outside. The other thing that's interesting and that I find special about Parmigiani is the restoration. And we are the only brand that restores watches and timepieces from any brand of any time. And that brings us into contact with the past of watchmaking all the time. And that's really exceptional. Whether it's a museum, whether it's a sculpture piece, a collection piece, that's extraordinary.
It brings you into contact to very, very high-level people as well, and very famous people as well. I know you can't talk about those clients, but is it true that that goes up to kings, where you actually restore pieces of them?
Yes, I mean, we just restored this year a piece that was given to a king, and that someone found and is now...
You can tell us who it is, of course.
It was given to the King of Morocco, to his current king's grandfather, and we restored it so the gentleman who owned it wanted to give it to the current king. And so it's a beautiful piece with some specifics, and what's always interesting is from each piece we restore, we find something we can adapt to modern time. And on that piece, I will not tell you more about because we will be launching a worldwide exclusivity at the end of the year about specifically inspired from that piece.
So this helps you in a way to kind of create the new pieces for the traditional watch brand?
On two ways. It gives us not only the ideas, but also the execution. We see what doesn't last in time. We see the mistakes that were made. And so we make sure we learn from those mistakes. And it's not only ours, but the mistakes made in the past centuries. And that's very interesting to find that. But we also see the beauty in decoration, the specific hands. And what's beautiful for us is that now our department of restoration is mostly made of young people. And that is fantastic because restoration used to be an elderly gentleman job. Now it's young people, passionate, who come in and want to discover what it's all about.
Do you struggle finding new people?
No. What's beautiful is the canton really offers the highest skilled people that we can find in the world. And that's why companies have to be there. It's because we have the workforce, we have the tradition, and people like to enter this industry. It is an industry for people who have to have a specific character. You're working on a lens from when you're 15 until you retire. You have to have that character and that concentration and that, I would say, being self-knowing and confident to do that kind of job. It's often a solitary job, and you have to have the character for it.
And you have to be adaptable as well to the industry's problem. We were talking about mistakes within the watches. There were some mistakes done by companies as well. When you arrived, for example, at Parmigiani, it was let's say a time of turmoil. They just had to let people go. They were going through a crisis. How is the brand, how is the company doing now?
Well, I would say the crisis was a trade crisis. I mean, larger groups did a lot of cutbacks. It was a moment in the whole trade of watchmaking that changed, and so everyone adapted. For Parmigiani, like for everyone else. What I would say today is we have a clear plan to go forwards. We have the support of the foundation, and we have really a rethinking of what we want to do and how we want to do it, how we want to execute it. We've also had some senior management come in on the level of our board, that also controls the board of the other companies of our pole. And so, of course, we make movements and dials and cases and components, and all these companies together have to have a meaning.
When you talk about the foundation, it's the Sando Foundation, it's the family Sando mainly behind it. Does that help you in your job, that you have a strong and, let's say, wealthy background behind it that you can always kind of rely on or fall back on?
Well, what I like is the whole inspiration behind it. When we look at the role of Parmigiani and all the industrial hub around it, the role is very different from anyone else in the industry. We restore pieces of any brand looking backwards, of any manufacturer looking backwards. But we also produce for most of the high-end brands of the trade today. And so basically, we consider ourselves rightly the golden heart of the industry. We serve for tomorrow's watches, we serve for yesterday's watches. Our role is that of maintaining high watchmaking, and we do it in all components and in our timepieces. So basically, we don't have competitors, we have colleagues. And when another brand does well and we supply them with either a movement or a component, we are doing well also. So it's our role and our position is completely different because we enjoy the success of the others, where maybe other brands see us as competitors.
But coming back to the question, you are in a way safer if you know that there is something like a safe or a sane financial background.
Of course, and the fact it's not only for us, but it's also for the trade. I mean, yesterday I was speaking with a very important distributor who really said, for us, it's different knowing that the foundation is behind you. We see the long term, we see the values in it, we see the understanding of where all this is.
How do you deal as an executive, as a boss, with those challenges of the industry, with the insecurity maybe sometimes? And I'm sure you must feel it also with the people who work for you, that they might ask you questions. How are we doing? How's the future going to look like? What kind of boss are you in that regard? That, you know, do you share a lot with them about?
Well, I have monthly meetings with all the staff, town hall meetings in which we just share exactly where we are, where we're going. Short term this month and longer term where we're going in the year, and we try to highlight each department, what's happening in each department. So we want everyone to know what's happening 360 within the company. And what I found is the feedback is that our colleagues really appreciate the openness and transparency. I personally think it's important to get everyone on board and for everyone to know the challenges, but also the successes we're having. Because each department does something well, or each country does something well, and I think it's fair to share this and also to share the best practice and the efforts that are made.
Is that part of your character as well? Because when you worked at Corum, for example, for the last watch company you worked for, they belonged to a Chinese company, and you said from the start, I'm going to be very transparent. We're going to talk about numbers. We're going to talk about everything that the journalists want to know. So that kind of openness, transparency, seems to be something that is very important to you, and which is not very. No, I wouldn't put it that way, but which is not that usual in the watch industry either. I mean, we have a lot of people who simply don't talk numbers either.
And I respect their position. I think it's always a question of who and what you have to do. I believe in it because I think it helps everyone to understand exactly who you are and where you're going. But again, it's my belief, and I don't criticize people who see it differently than me.
Mm-hmm. When we go back to that last job, you were working, as I said, you were working already there in a very international industry. Again, the question, having worked for example, for a Chinese company, and now working for a kind of more traditional Swiss foundation. Did that, you know, did your kind of international roots help in that regard as well? That you can adapt quite easily to, you know, the different working environments and cultural environments.
I think you always learn. That's what's fun, is you learn the challenges of all different ones. And before that, I worked a long time for Chopard, family-owned. So it's fun is adapting and understanding and seeing exactly what the stakeholders want and need and require. And it's a two-way road. I mean, you adapt to them, they adapt to you. So it's a kind of learning, and it's interesting. That's what's fun about the job. I mean, that's why you go on changing and you go on trying to find new challenges and something that's interesting. Mm-hmm.
Going back to the challenges of the industry, where do you see the Swiss watch industry at the moment? There have been difficult years. They you know, seem to have finished, but nobody really knows at the moment. Where do you see it going?
No, I think it's honestly a very healthy trade. I do see that the market has matured. But mature is not bad. And mature is healthy. And I think the skills of management required today are getting higher and higher. And that's useful. We'll bring in managers from other trades. What you see is less egos in the CEO and more real value in the middle management coming up. And that means the company are becoming more mature, better managed, and we're importing from other trades. So when a market is skyrocketing and going fast, it's kind of easy to grow and easy to think that the success is due to yourself. It's not, it's the market. And when the market is flatter, then all of a sudden you really have to be good at it. And I always think that that's very healthy for a trade in itself.
Yeah, that only the best survive in a way, right?
I think everyone gets better. Yeah. So it's not really the best survive, it's everyone does get better.
And where are the markets of the future? I know everybody talking about China, about Asia. I know Parmigiani is heavily investing or going into that direction as well. I think you even reduce a little bit in Europe and find new markets in Asia. Is that the road paved in gold for you?
No, that's the reality today. It's not the future. I mean, the reality today is more or less 40% of watches sold in the world are sold to Asian consumers, whether in Asia or elsewhere. What I think the two opportunities that are left for the trade that are not yet open are South America, where we still have very strong entry barriers and taxes, and if they come down, that will be a big market. And the other one is India. Same thing, we have high import taxes, but very skilled retailers, very interesting things happening there. So I really feel that is a market that when finally the barriers will come down, it will be an interesting market for everyone.
How is our reputation there, or the reputation of the Swiss watch industry? Is it the same as worldwide? I mean, it's high class, it's prime.
It's prime, it's high class, it's very respected. It's just not available because of the taxes. But when it comes down, it'll be a beautiful market for our whole trade.
Speaking of prime products, you are working and dealing in a high, let's say a high level of watches. Were you ever tempted to change that? I mean, let's say put out cheaper watches or more affordable watches, or even kind of go even higher, go even more expensive. Is that a question you ask yourself?
I think you have to always look at your positioning. That's something you have to look at it versus the market versus competitors. I would say that today we have to position ourselves where our industrial tool is, and our industrial tool is there to make high-end premium products decorated in the Swiss tradition, and so we are deemed to be a high-end brand. Of course, there are always exceptional pieces that go above for specific clients, but our positioning today is exactly where we should be. We are a premium brand, niche, specific, for a self-knowing, confident and aware consumer who makes his own individual choice for something special and different.
Niche means also, there are hundreds of hours going into one piece only, meaning that you can't really produce that many. I mean, we're talking about
exactly.
3,000, 4,000 maybe a year. Are you ever tempted to go to 20, 30,000 to just make it with the mass, or would you destroy the brand? Would you destroy also the quality of the brand?
I think we can grow to a certain extent, but I think there are caps. I think there's a segment that goes from 2 to 20,000, another segment from 20 to 40. But there is a point where you have to kind of ask yourself who you are and where you want to be. And I think that we have space to grow, certainly, wide space to grow, but I wouldn't think we would change our real positioning at all.
And you would have to move out of Fleurier, I guess, no?
No, we can produce in Fleurier a lot more if we want to, but the point is that's not us. I mean, this is a brand that has to remain a select high-end brand.
Speaking of Fleurier, you live in Switzerland now again. You've lived here before, of course, and you are Swiss as well. How is that? Is it kind of a coming back for you also as a businessman, as someone who might be working for another 20 or maybe let's say 15 years? Do you ever see yourself going back abroad or work in a completely different continent? It's hard to say, right? In that industry.
I mean, I'm always open to everything. I mean, now I have a very clear mission. It's something I'm focusing on, but I've always been open to live anywhere. Just 3 years ago, I had an interesting interview for a position in India. And I said, why not? It's interesting for me. My children are grown and working, and it's a pleasure. They also live, one in France, one in Spain, one in Italy. And so they're also traveled, and they enjoy that also. And so I don't see a real issue in where I am geographically. It doesn't make a difference to me.
Have you found time for a hobby yet? Because I read somewhere that you called yourself almost like a 19th century man. You said, I don't have hobbies, I just have work and my family. I just divide it in those two. Now that the family is out, you might have time for a hobby.
Yeah, that's my big question. Where is the hobby, right? So the children are, and I miss the small children, I must admit. I love having small children, and now my children are grown. I kind of do miss that part.
Okay. You can do it as a grandfather.
Yes, because now this year I've become grandfather, and so I can start that. But it's true that, no, I'm not a big hobby person. I like to work, I enjoy my work, and what I really enjoy is when you work with, even if it's a small company, it's global. And so early in the morning, I speak to Japan. Late in the evening after work, I speak to the United States, East Coast, West Coast. And so I can just go on having my conversations about work, and I really enjoy the oral part of our business. Our business is a lot personal relationships. And I enjoy the fact that the salespeople, the retailers, everyone in our business just feels free to call me when they want. I never switch my phone off. It's always on, except on the airplane. And I take calls at all times, and I enjoy speaking and hearing direct feedback. I am a more oral person than written person, so I really enjoy being in contact with people.
I mean, in that regard, coming back to the beginning of the interview, you kind of found your calling in the watch industry, because you always wanted to be international and you always wanted to be in touch with people. So it doesn't get any more international or more kind of, you know, communicative than the industry you're in, right?
Yes, and the industry is, again, there's a lot of people. It's all made of people. So many of the retailers are family owned, and so it's personal relationships. And we build trust, you build relationships, you know the children. And that's the beautiful part of it. You just see people from all over the world, whether from Singapore, from Hong Kong, from Dallas, from Cleveland, Ohio, and you get to know them, and you know them in depth, and you respect their traditions. Some have religious traditions, some have geographic traditions, and you just get to know them and to understand them, and remembering all the dates that are important to them and to make the call. It's a learning experience every single day.
I was just thinking, you speak, or that sounds a lot like a politician would speak. And I know you studied political sciences in Milano. Did that help you in that regard as well, to be a bit, you know, again, very diplomatic and very open to different approaches and cultures, maybe?
No, everything I studied at the university was absolutely useless for me.
Really?
Yes, always useless, but very enjoyable. I love it. And I go back, and I love history, so I love to read about history. But no, it's not useful, it's just my pleasure. But speaking with people, to me, is what enriches me every day.
Is that something that is still lacking in that industry as well? We were talking about, you know, that maybe also the image that the industry has, that maybe we're not that good in communicating what we do, and what we do, you know, on a very high level. Do you think we could learn from your model, or maybe from Parmigiani, how to do it better?
I wouldn't agree. I think we tend to criticize ourselves a lot. I think the industry, if you look at it, has been incredible for the country. I mean, look at the reputation that is worldwide for quality and for the mechanics and micromechanics. I think Switzerland has been able to send this message to the world in a way that is remarkable. You can always do better, but I think a lot could have done worse, you know. To do better than what was done in watchmaking for this country is difficult. I mean, it's really impressive what the watchmaking trade did for the country.
So having said that, do you think we're too self-critical? Does it need an international mind like you sometimes to kind of remind us of the good things we do?
Yeah, I think we should be proud of what the watch industry has done. Honestly, in reputation and everything, I think it's fantastic.
Speaking of the watch industry, last question. We talked about, you know, your career so far, and we talked about that you might have another 15 or 20 years to go. In that watch industry, people tend to get quite old. I mean, they work for years and years. They can still do something at 70, 75. How long do you want to work?
I don't know, honestly. Don't ask me that question. I'm so tired already. You know, I can't imagine. I have colleagues who, you know, in their 70s, and they look like they're in better shape than me. But I think they have hobbies and they have all those other things, you know. So I'll do my best and get along. I think as long as you're interesting and you're useful, it's great. And I think the ambition is always to be able to go as long as you're doing well. I've worked with gentlemen in early 80s who still have a lot to teach to me, and that's interesting for me. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. So I think it all goes down to the question. Tell, right? And you will have to find a hobby. How about golfing or fishing or something like that?
Not me.
Davide Traxler, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.